I'm always talking about the state of digital camera technology, and so I went out and bought the cheapest camera you can buy on Amazon.com right now. It's $14.99, 20 megapixels, and it's pink. How are the photos? How does it do? Let's see. So disclaimer, I bought this with all of my own money. I spent almost $15, I guess more than that with tax. This is prices as of late April 2023. So let's dive into the images, the video. Oh yes, it does video, and a few of the tech details. Let's start by seeing what comes in the box. Here, it's a summer vacation camera according to the packaging. I'm going to open it up. You'll see in addition to the camera, got a little cloth or corded lanyard. We got a USB cable. It's 2023. And yes, it's a USB micro to USB-A connector because let's see if we can put, the absolute worst possible things on either end of that cable. Looking at the camera itself, it is super cheap. It is plastic all the time. And it feels like cheap plastic, as you may not be surprised. The other thing that's kind of interesting is right at the top of that screen is a completely fake viewfinder. That's just a little piece of black plastic that doesn't actually do anything. There's no viewfinder to look through. Everything you do is on the LCD. Now, if we dive into the photos, it can be hard to compare something on its own. I'm going to compare against some photos from my iPhone 14 Pro. I don't know if that's a fair comparison or if we're comparing apples and oranges, but here we go. As you'll see, a big obnoxious date stamp on these images from the test camera. At first, I was annoyed. I realized I can actually remove that in the camera settings. It does have settings. But then I said, nothing says cheap camera like a big obnoxious date stamp, right? So I'm going to leave it on. Turns out it does record EXIF data accurately. I also wasn't sure if I could trust that. So you can see right here for my test images, I'm going to use things that are typical casual snapshots: food, people, stuff, and food. And no, I didn't misspeak. I said food twice because we need to check with both pizza and tacos. So let's get into that pizza. Not the worst photo ever, but as you can see, we're lacking in detail. That container of Parmesan cheese there, just kind of one big white blob. Obviously doesn't handle the dynamic range as well as the iPhone, which is not a giant shocker. Let's look at a person. Here's my buddy Matt sipping on his stout at a brewery recently. Kind of interesting to note, obviously we've got blown out windows behind him. Also interesting to see that his ring has got a kind of a green flare on it. Keep that in mind. We're going to see something else like that in just a moment. This is where I think you can really see that the fact that the iPhone uses computational photography to do an automatic HDR of multiple exposures gives us a much better dynamic range. So let's look at some stuff. Let's look at the colors in these photos. I thought this was an interesting comparison to kind of check out the colors. Check out that basket looking thing there on the shelf and the amount of chromatic aberration that we're seeing from the plastic camera, right? Just colors all over the place. I've got magentas in there, greens, weird blues, all sorts of odd stuff going on. And let's wrap up with some tacos. Which one would you rather eat? I think I know the answer to that question, but it gets even better. It does video. Now, it doesn't have a tripod mount on the bottom, which made figuring out how I was going to mount this for video kind of interesting, but hey, that's what gaff tape is for, right? So I used some gaffer's tape, taped it onto a light stand, and here's what I look like as I record video with this goofy little camera. I don't think I'm going to be replacing my mirrorless camera to be used as my primary YouTube device going forward. So we've seen the results. A couple tech notes though before my overall thoughts. So one thing that's interesting is, although you saw that USB cable is only for charging. You cannot export your photos via USB. If you want to export the photos, you need to use a memory card. It uses a micro SD card, also known as a TF card, up to 32 gigabytes. And so that's what I put in there. Put that into the card reader on my USB hub. All was good as far as transferring the images across. So what's the point? My point is multi-pronged, but there's a couple things. First of all, megapixels aren't everything. This is 20 megapixels, but we can see the quality of the images that we got. The other thing is it really points out how important computational photography is for modern digital cameras. Indeed, the artificial intelligence and algorithms that are used by something like the iPhone or any modern mirrorless camera really are what help take the image from what we get straight off the sensor into something that's much more interesting, much higher quality, and much more useful to us. This little guy for $14.99, there's not really computational photography happening here. So it's fun to take a look at the state of things. This is a goofy little toy, and yet, these images really aren't any worse than the ones we were getting off of our phone cameras, say 15, 20 years ago, when we had the flip phones and we texted with T9. But it's interesting to see how far we've come. It's an interesting little exercise to see what's out there. I just thought this was fun. Next time I'm here, I'll be back with something a lot more modern, I promise you. So subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the email newsletter. We're just having fun with digital photography. Take care.